Two words from a 7-year-old boy just destroyed a millionaire's entire empire in 30 seconds flat. What if I told you that the most powerful CEO in the city was brought to his knees by a child's voice? Not by a board meeting, not by a financial scandal, not by a lawsuit, but by two simple words that cut through decades of lies like a knife through silk. Have you ever had someone from your past confront you about something you thought you'd buried forever? Someone whose very existence threatens to expose every dirty secret you've spent years hiding? Well, that's exactly what happened to Edwin Rutherford on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening. That would change everything. This is the story of how Edwin Rutherford's billion-dollar empire crumbled the moment he heard those two devastating words. But what were those words, and why did they have the power to shatter everything he'd built? Before we dive into this shocking tale, drop a comment with your location and what time you're watching this. I want to see where my SoulThread family is tuning in from. Your support means everything to me. Now, let me paint you a scene that will haunt your dreams. The city's most exclusive district gleamed under the harsh glow of streetlights, rain cascading down glass towers like tears from heaven itself. Edwin Rutherford sat in the back of his jet-black sedan, worth more than most people make in 5 years. The leather seats hand-stitched in Italy, the champagne chilling in the minibar, the phone buzzing with congratulations about another multi-million-dollar deal he'd closed that afternoon. This man had everything. Penthouse overlooking the city, private jets, houses in 3 countries, a company that controlled half the construction projects in the state, politicians on speed dial, the kind of wealth that makes you untouchable. Or so he thought. Edwin's reflection stared back at him from the tinted window. Sharp suit, perfectly styled gray hair, the kind of confident smile that graced magazine covers. Self-made billionaire transformed city skyline. The headlines read, "From humble beginnings to corporate giant." The media loved his story. Poor kid from the wrong side of town who clawed his way to the top through sheer determination. But every success story has its shadows. Every empire has its secrets. Every king has bodies buried beneath his throne. As the sedan glided through the rain-slicked streets, Edwin's mind wandered to the speech he'd given that morning. Rutherford Industries remains committed to community development and social responsibility. He declared a thunderous applause. The board members nodded. The investors smiled. The cameras rolled. All eyes. Because while Edwin spoke of community investment, entire neighborhoods disappeared to make way for his luxury developments. While he preached about giving back, families were forced from homes they'd owned for generations. While he promised opportunities for local workers, he hired cheap labor from out of state and left communities devastated. The cars slowed as they approached the edge of the business district. This was where the gleaming towers gave way to something else. Something Edwin tried very hard never to look at directly. The other side of his success story. The part the magazines never mentioned. Cracked sidewalks, boarded windows, a cold playground with broken swings that creaked in the wind like the ghosts of children's laughter. This was a neighborhood that paid the price for Edwin's empire. This was where dreams came to die so that it could live. But tonight, something was different. As the sedan pulled to a stop at a red light, Edwin's eyes caught movement in the rearview mirror. A small figure stood beneath a flickering streetlight, rain streaming down his dark skin. A boy, no more than 7 years old, wearing clothes that had seen better days but carried himself with a dignity that seemed impossible for someone so young. Their eyes met in that mirror, brown eyes that burned with intensity that made Edwin's breath catch in his throat. There was something familiar about that stare, something that reached through the years and grabbed him by the soul. The boy stepped forward, closer to the car. Water dripped from his hair, but he didn't flinch, didn't look away. Those eyes, God, those eyes, held secrets that could topple kingdoms. Edwin's heart began to race. His perfectly manicured hands trembled against the leather seat, because somewhere in the deepest corner of his memory, he recognized that face, recognized those eyes, recognized the curve of those cheekbones that mirrored his own. The boy's lips moved. 2 words. So quiet Edwin almost missed them. So powerful they shook the foundation of everything he'd built. Shut up. Now here's what I need you to understand about power. Real power isn't about money. It isn't about influence. It isn't about fear. Real power is truth. And the truth has a way of finding you, no matter how fast you run or how high you build your walls. If you believe that justice always catches up with those who abuse their power, if you think the voices of the forgotten deserve to be heard, then hit that like button right now. Because staying silent when you witness injustice makes you part of the problem. Don't be part of the problem. Those 2 words were about to unleash a storm that would destroy everything Edwin thought he knew about himself. But why? What did this child know? And how was he connected to the empire that was about to fall? Stay with me, because what happens next will change how you see success, power, and redemption forever. To understand the earthquake that was about to hit Edwin Rutherford, you need to know exactly what he'd built his life on. Because the higher you climb, the harder you fall. Every morning, Edwin woke up in a penthouse that cost more than most hospitals. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a city he'd reshaped with his bare hands. Well, not exactly his hands. The hands of thousands of workers who'd never see a fraction of what he made from their labor. His daily routine was a masterpiece of calculated performance. First, the private gym where a personal trainer helped to maintain the physique that looked good on magazine covers. Next, breakfast prepared by a chef who'd worked for celebrities. Then the ride to Rutherford Industries headquarters. 37 floors of gleaming steel and glass that pierced the sky like a monument to his own ego. But here's where it gets interesting. Every single day, Edwin's route to the office took him past 3 neighborhoods his company had destroyed. 3 communities that used to thrive before Rutherford Industries moved in with promises of progress and prosperity. The first was Millfield District, once home to small businesses that had served families for generations. Edwin's company bought the land for mixed-use development. Translation? They bulldozed everything and built luxury condos that the original residents couldn't afford. The displaced families? Edwin never asked where they went. The second was Riverside Heights, a working-class area with tree-lined streets where kids played in yards and neighbors knew each other's names. Rutherford Industries needed the space for a shopping complex. The community fought for 2 years. They held rallies. They filed petitions. They begged Edwin personally to find another location. His response? Progress doesn't wait for sentiment. The third neighborhood was Oakwood. This one hit different because Edwin had actually grown up 3 blocks away. He knew these streets. He'd played in that park. He bought candy from Mrs. Rodriguez's corner store. But when Rutherford Industries needed land for their logistics center, Edwin signed the demolition orders without hesitation. Mrs. Rodriguez died 6 months later in a nursing home across town, heartbroken and alone. Has anyone ever made you promises they never intended to keep? Someone who looked you in the eye, shook your hand, and swore they'd take care of you, then left you with nothing? That was Edwin's specialty. He perfected the art of compassionate lies. Every press conference included carefully crafted phrases about community partnership and sustainable development. His PR team had focus grouped every word to maximum emotional impact. We're not just building structures. Edwin would declare from behind podiums decorated with flowers. We're building futures. We're creating opportunities. We're investing in dreams. Meanwhile, his legal team worked overtime to find loopholes that let him break every promise without consequences. Community centers that were supposed to be built, delayed due to permit issues. Job training programs for displaced workers, postponed pending budget reviews. Affordable housing units. Market conditions have changed. The media ate it up. Business magazines praise his innovative approach to urban development. City council members lined up to shake his hand at charity galas. The mayor personally awarded him the key to the city for his outstanding contributions to municipal growth. But here's what Edwin didn't know that night, as he sat in that luxury sedan staring at the boy in his rearview mirror. Every lie has an expiration date. Every betrayal leaves a scar. Every broken promise creates an enemy. And enemies don't forget. They wait. They watch. They prepare. The rain hammered against the car's roof like accusations Edwin had spent years trying to silence. Outside his tinted windows, the world he created stretched in both directions. Towering glass monuments to his success on one side, crumbling remnants of the communities he'd sacrificed on the other. The contrast was stark. Obscene, really. His sedan's interior featured leather that cost more per square foot than most people paid in monthly rent. The sound system played classical music composed by masters who died centuries ago. The climate control maintained perfect temperature, while people shivered in apartments with broken heating systems they couldn't afford to fix. And there, standing in the rain just yards away, was that boy, still staring, still waiting, still carrying something in his eyes that made Edwin's chest tighten with a fear he couldn't name. Something felt different about tonight. Edwin had driven these streets hundreds of times, but he'd never noticed that particular streetlight before, never seen that specific corner where the boy stood, never felt the weight of those watching eyes pressing against his conscience like physical force. The boy took a step closer to the car. Water streamed down his face, but he didn't blink, didn't look away. His small frame radiated a kind of quiet strength that seemed impossible for someone so young. Edwin's phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Congratulations on the Westbrook project approval. Another $200 million in the bank. The Westbrook project would displace 847 families, but the text didn't mention that part. If you've ever been lied to by someone in power, if you've watched corporations destroy communities while pretending to help them, if you believe that accountability should mean something, then you need to share this story right now. Because the only way to stop this cycle is to expose it. Don't let them get away with it. Edwin lowered his window just a crack. Rain immediately began seeping inside, mixing with the expensive air conditioning and leather scent. The boy stepped even closer, close enough that Edwin could see the determination burning in those familiar brown eyes. The child opened his mouth again, and this time, Edwin heard him perfectly. 23 years earlier, Edwin Rutherford was nobody special. Back then, his hands were calloused from construction work, not soft from signing million-dollar contracts. His apartment was a cramped two-bedroom in Riverside Heights, the same neighborhood he'd later destroy without a second thought. The walls were thin enough that he could hear Mrs. Johnson's television through plaster, and the radiator clanged like a broken symphony every winter morning. But Edwin didn't care about the noise or the peeling paint or the way his shower only produced lukewarm water on good days. Because every evening at 6:47 p.m., Veronica Martinez would walk past his building on her way home from a community college where she taught literacy classes to adults who'd never gotten the chance to finish school. Veronica moved through those streets like she owned them, not with the arrogance of ownership, but with the confidence of belonging. When she walked, neighbors called out greetings from their stoops. Children ran to her for hugs. Elderly men tipped their hats with genuine respect. She wore thrift store dresses that somehow looked like designer gowns on her curves, and her laugh could cut to the noise of traffic and construction and city chaos, like a song you've been waiting your whole life to hear. Edwin spent 3 weeks working up the courage to say hello. When he finally did, she was carrying groceries that split through a cheap plastic bag, oranges rolling across the sidewalk like escaped suns. "Need help?" he asked, scrambling to collect the scattered fruit. "Depends," she replied, studying him with eyes that missed nothing. "You planning to actually help, or just looking for an excuse to talk to me?" "Both," he admitted, and her smile hit him like lightning. That was how it started. Grocery bags and scattered oranges and a smile that changed everything. Within months, they were inseparable. Veronica would drag him to community meetings where residents fought City Hall over broken streetlights and dangerous intersections. She'd make him help serve meals at the church on Sundays, where families who'd lost jobs could eat with dignity. She introduced him to real community, not the networking events and charity galas he'd later attend, but genuine connection between people who genuinely cared about each other. This is what matters. She'd tell him as they walk home past front porches, where 3 generations sat together watching the sunset. Not what you own, but who you serve. Not what you build, but what you protect. Edwin believed her then. God help him. He believed every word. Their love story played out against the backdrop of sounds Edwin would never forget. The sizzle of plantains in Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen. The bounce of basketballs against backboards in the community court, where teenagers dreamed of better futures. The rumble of the elevated train that carried people to jobs in the gleaming downtown district, where Edwin would later build his empire. On summer nights, they'd sit on the fire escape outside his apartment window, sharing cheap wine and expensive dreams. Veronica would talk about expanding the literacy program. Edwin would sketch designs for affordable housing that could bring beauty to working-class neighborhoods, without displacing the families who lived there. You could build something amazing, she'd whisper, tracing the lines of his drawings with fingers that smelled like chalk and hope. Something that lifts people up instead of pushing them out. But success has a way of corrupting dreams. Edwin's construction skills caught the attention of bigger companies, better-paying jobs, clients who wore suits instead of work boots and talked about profit margins instead of community impact. The money started small, a few extra hundred per week, then a few thousand, then amounts that made his old salary look like pocket change. With each promotion, each raise, each step up a ladder, the distance between Edwin and Riverside Heights grew wider, and Veronica noticed. "You're changing," she said one autumn evening as Edwin celebrated landing his first contract worth 6 figures. "I can see in your eyes. You're starting to look at people differently." "I'm looking at opportunities," Edwin replied. "I'm thinking bigger." Bigger for who? That question would haunt him for decades. The night everything changed, Veronica called him to their favorite spot, the community center where they first volunteered together. She was wearing the blue dress he'd bought her for their 1-year anniversary, but her face carried news that would shatter both their worlds. "I'm pregnant," she said. Edwin felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Not because he didn't want children, but because of what children meant. Responsibility. Roots. A future tied to this neighborhood, and these people, and this life he was already trying to escape. "We can make this work," Veronica continued, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "We can build something beautiful together. Raise our child in a community that loves them. Show them what it means to belong somewhere." But Edwin was already calculating, already measuring the cost. A child meant staying put, meant choosing love over ambition, meant building a life instead of building an empire. Every success story is a shadow, and Edwin's shadow had a name. It was a name he chose not to know, the child he chose not to hold, the family he chose not to build. 3 months later, Edwin signed his first major development contract. The project required him to relocate to the other side of the city. Better opportunities, his new boss explained. Room for advancement. A chance to work with serious players in serious markets. Edwin never told Veronica about the job. He just disappeared. Left her with nothing but silence and the echo of promises he decided were too expensive to keep. She tried calling. She wrote letters. She even showed up at his new office building once, 7 months pregnant and desperate, only to be turned away by security guards who'd been instructed to keep her out. That was the last time Edwin saw her face. But now, 23 years later, staring at the boy in his rearview mirror, Edwin realized something that made his blood turn to ice. Veronica had never tried to contact him again after that day at his office, never demanded child support, never told anyone who the father was. But children grow up, and sometimes they come looking for answers. The boy stepped fully into the light. Edwin's breath caught in his throat as every detail came into sharp focus. The child couldn't have been more than 7, but he carried himself like someone who'd seen too much, survived too much, endured too much for his age. His clothes were clean but worn, jeans with patches at the knees, sneakers that had walked countless miles, a jacket 2 sizes too big that probably came from a donation box. But it was the eyes that stopped Edwin's heart cold. brown eyes flecked with gold, set in a face that could have been Edwin's own childhood reflection. The same stubborn jawline, the same way of tilting his head when studying something carefully, the same expression Edwin's mother used to call old soul eyes, the look of someone who understood the world's cruelty far too early. Those eyes locked onto Edwin through the rain-streaked window with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. The boy didn't blink, didn't look away, just stood there in the downpour, water dripping from his dark hair, studying the man in the luxury sedan, like he was trying to solve a puzzle that had been bothering him for years. Edwin's hands trembled as he reached for the window button. The tinted glass lowered with an electronic hum that seemed thunderous in the sudden silence. Rain immediately began spattering the leather seats, but Edwin didn't care. He needed to hear, needed to know. "What did you say?" Edwin's voice came out as barely a whisper. The boy stepped closer to the car, close enough that Edwin could see the determination burning behind those familiar features, close enough to notice the way the child's small fists were clenched at his sides, close enough to hear the steadiness in his young voice when he spoke again. "I said shut up." But this time, the words hit different, louder, clearer, loaded with 23 years of absence and abandonment and questions that had never been answered. Edwin's world tilted on its axis. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. Sweat mixed with rainwater on his forehead as memories he'd buried came flooding back with the force of a dam bursting. Veronica's voice from that last conversation. "This child will carry your blood, Edwin, your eyes, your dreams. You can walk away from me, but you can't walk away from what we created together." He dismissed her words as emotional manipulation, desperate attempts to trap him in a life he was determined to escape. But now, staring at this boy who looked like a miniature version of himself, Edwin realized the truth had been standing in front of him all along. And that's when Edwin's world began to crumble. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, like a controlled demolition where every support beam is cut simultaneously and a skyscraper collapses into its own foundation in seconds. The boy, his son, dear God, his son, stood there dripping wet and defiant, small shoulders squared against the storm. Behind him, the abandoned Riverside Community Center loomed like a monument to Edwin's betrayal. This was the building where he'd first fallen in love with Veronica, where they'd volunteered together, where she probably brought their child as a toddler, hoping against hope that Edwin might walk through those doors again. The center's windows were boarded now, covered with graffiti and notices about condemned property. The parking lot where families used to gather for summer barbecues had cracked into geometric patterns, weeds pushing through asphalt like nature reclaiming stolen ground. Even the sign was damaged, Riverside Com 90 CNTR, with half the letters missing or hanging at broken angles. Edwin had driven past this place hundreds of times over the years, had seen the gradual decay, had known his development projects were partly responsible for the center's closure when the neighborhood could no longer support it. But he'd never once wondered about the children who'd lost their safe space, never considered the families left with nowhere to gather, never thought about his own child growing up in the shadow of his father's destruction. "You don't remember me," the boy said, and his voice carried a weight that seemed impossible for someone so young. "But I remember you. Have you ever had a moment where your past and present collided with such violence that reality itself seemed to fracture? Where everything you thought you knew about yourself suddenly revealed itself as a carefully constructed lie?" That's what was happening to Edwin right now. 23 years of success, wealth, and carefully managed public image crashing against the undeniable truth standing in the rain before him. The boy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something that made Edwin's vision blur. A photograph, creased and water-stained but still recognizable. It showed Edwin and Veronica at a community festival, arms wrapped around each other, faces bright with laughter and love, and the naive belief that they could change the world together. "She kept this," the boy said, holding the photo up so Edwin could see it clearly. "She told me stories about the man in this picture. Said he was different from the man on TV. Said he used to care about people like us. Edwin's throat closed. His hand shook so violently he had to grip the car door to steady himself, because now he could see it, really see it. This wasn't just any child. This was Veronica's son. His son, the baby he'd run from before it was even born. She's gone, the boy continued, his young voice steady despite the tears mixing with rain on his cheeks. Cancer. 3 months ago. But before she died, she made me promise something. The city seemed to hold its breath. Even the rain appeared to pause, hanging in the air like the moment before lightning strikes. She made me promise to find you, to look you in the eye, to tell you exactly what your success cost. Edwin tried to speak, tried to find words that could bridge 23 years of abandonment, but his voice had abandoned him entirely. The boy stepped closer to the car window. So close Edwin could see the intelligence burning in those eyes, his eyes. So close he could hear the pain beneath the controlled anger. My name is Trayvon, the boy said. Trayvon Martinez. And you, Mr. Edwin Rutherford, are my father. The words hit Edwin like bullets. Each syllable a direct shot to everything he thought he knew about his life, his choices, his carefully constructed identity. Trayvon's small hand pressed against the car window, palm flat against the glass separating them. She said you'd try to make excuses. Said you have reasons and explanations and justifications for why you left us behind. The boy leaned closer, his breath fogging the window between them. That's why she taught me to say it. The words that would stop all your excuses. The words that would make you finally listen. Edwin's heart stopped beating. The world stopped spinning. Time itself seemed to freeze as he waited for whatever came next. Trayvon's eyes blazed with hurt and fury, and a strength that shouldn't exist in someone so young. Shut up, he said again. Just shut up and listen to what you did to us. Edwin stared into Trayvon's face and saw his own childhood staring back. The recognition hit him like a freight train loaded with guilt and 23 years of denial. Same nose, same stubborn chin, same way of pressing his lips together when angry, an expression Edwin's own mother had scolded him for countless times. But it was more than physical features, something deeper. The way Trayvon held his head high despite being drenched and alone. The same fierce pride that had driven Edwin to claw his way out of poverty. No, Edwin whispered, though even as the word left his mouth, he knew it was a lie. This isn't you can't be. Can't be what? Trayvon's voice cut through Edwin's denial like glass. Can't be your son? Can't be the child you abandoned before I was even born. The boy reached into his jacket again and pulled out a birth certificate. The paper protected in a plastic bag, but still worn from handling. Trayvon Martinez. Father unknown. He held it up to the window. She never put your name down. Said you didn't deserve the honor. Edwin's hands flew to his chest as his heart hammered against his ribs. The air in the car became thick, suffocating. He fumbled for the door handle, stumbling out into the rain, because he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what was happening. The cold water hit his face like a slap of reality. His expensive suit immediately soaked through, clinging to his body like the truth he'd spent decades avoiding. He stood there in the downpour, face to face with the son he'd never known, in front of the community center, where his love story had died. You want to know the real joke? Trayvon stepped closer, rain streaming down his young face. The Riverside Heights Development Project. The one that made you your first $100 million. The one that got you on the cover of Business Weekly. Edwin's blood turned to ice. He knew exactly which project Trayvon meant. His breakthrough deal. The development that had launched Rutherford Industries into the big leagues. You bulldoze our neighborhood. Trayvon continued, his voice steady despite his age. 17 buildings. 347 families displaced. Also, you could build luxury condos that none of us could afford. The words hit Edwin like physical blows. He remembered that project, remembered the profit margins, remembered the celebration dinner when the last building was demolished. He'd never once asked about the families who'd lived there, Mama tried to fight it, Trayvon said. She went to every city council meeting, started a petition that got 2,000 signatures, organized protests, even chained herself to the bulldozers on demolition day. Edwin's knees nearly buckled. The protesters. He remembered now. There had been demonstrations, but his legal team had assured him they were just professional agitators trying to block progress. He'd never looked closely at their faces, never wondered about their stories. But here's the really sick part. Trayvon's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She never told anyone you were my father, never used it as leverage, never tried to guilt you into stopping the demolition by saying you were destroying your own son's home. The full weight of the betrayal crashed over Edwin like a collapsing building. He hadn't just abandoned a woman and child. He'd spent decades systematically destroying the community where his son grew up, every development project, every displaced family, every broken promise about affordable housing and community investment. He'd been waging war against his own blood without even knowing it. She said you'd come back someday. Trayvon continued. Said the man she fell in love with was still in there somewhere, buried under all that money and success. She waited 16 years for you to remember where you came from. Edwin's throat closed as a memory surfaced. Veronica's voice from their last conversation, 23 years ago. One day you'll look around at everything you built and realize you destroyed the only things that actually mattered. And when that day comes, don't expect forgiveness. Expect consequences. She died in a hospital bed at County General. Trayvon said, his young voice cracking for the first time. The same hospital your company tried to shut down last year to build a shopping center. She died looking out the window at a billboard advertising your latest luxury development. The irony was devastating, crushing. Edwin had built his empire on the bones of his own son's world, and the woman who'd loved him had died surrounded by monuments to his betrayal. Every time you said shut up, to protesters, to community leaders, to families begging you to spare their homes, she was one of those voices. Edwin realized, his voice barely audible above the rain. All those years, you were telling your own mother to shut up. Trayvon nodded slowly. And now it's my turn. I'm the voice you can't silence anymore. I'm the consequence you can't buy your way out of. I'm the truth you spent 23 years running from. But the story doesn't end there, because Trayvon wasn't finished. The boy reached into his jacket one more time and pulled out a letter, handwritten in flowing script Edwin recognized immediately. She wrote this before she died, Trayvon said. Wanted me to read it to you when I found you. Edwin's hands shook as he stared at Veronica's handwriting. After all these years, seeing her words felt like being stabbed in the chest. If you're watching the story and you've ever seen a parent abandon their children, if you believe that children deserve better than being treated like collateral damage in adults' selfish games, then you need to share this right now. Because every child abandoned by a parent who chose money over love needs their voice heard. Don't let another Trayvon grow up invisible. She said to tell you that every building you destroyed had children living in it. Trayvon continued. Every family you displaced had dreams. Every community you erased had love stories just like yours once was. Edwin fell to his knees on the wet pavement. 23 years of guilt crashing down on him like the building he'd spent his life constructing. His empire, his success, his carefully crafted public image. All of it built on the destruction of his own son's world. I'm the one you left behind, Trayvon said, standing over his father's broken form. I'm every promise you broke. Every family you destroyed, every voice you silenced. The boy leaned down until his face was inches from Edwin's. So shut up, he whispered, and finally listen to what you did to us. Edwin knelt on that rain-soaked pavement for what felt like hours, though only minutes had passed. His expensive suit was ruined. His perfectly styled hair hung in wet strands. His public image, the polished CEO who controlled boardrooms with confidence, had shattered completely. And for the first time in 23 years, Edwin Rutherford felt human again. Slowly, painfully, he lifted his head to look at his son. Trayvon stood there waiting, water dripping from his too big jacket, but his posture had shifted. The anger was still there. It would be there for years, maybe forever. But now something else flickered in those familiar brown eyes. The faintest spark of hope. "I can't undo what I've done," Edwin said, his voice raw from crying. "I can't bring back the homes I destroyed or give your mother the life she deserved. I can't give you back 23 years of having a father." Trayvon's jaw tightened, but he didn't walk away. "But I can stop," Edwin continued, rising slowly to his feet. "I can stop pretending my success was built on anything other than other people's pain. I can stop lying to myself about what kind of man I became." The rain began to lighten, shifting from a downpour to a steady drizzle. Edwin took a tentative step toward his son, then another, until they stood face to face in the shadow of the abandoned community center. "Will you walk with me?" Edwin asked. "There's something I need to see." Without waiting for an answer, Edwin started moving down the cracked sidewalk that bordered what used to be Riverside Heights. Trayvon hesitated for a moment, then fell into step beside him. They walked in silence past empty lots where houses used to stand, past concrete foundations that were all that remained of Mrs. Rodriguez's corner store, past the skeletal remains of the cold playground where Edwin had once pushed Veronica on the swings while she laughed and told him about her dreams for the future. "She planted a garden here," Trayvon said suddenly, pointing to a patch of weeds growing through broken asphalt. "Tomatoes and peppers and sunflowers." Said it was important to grow beautiful things, even in ugly places. Edwin stopped walking. In the dim light, he could just make out the remnants of what might have been garden rows, now overrun with wild grass and debris. "She never gave up," Trayvon continued, "even after the bulldozers came. Even after we had to move to the projects on the east side. She kept saying you'd remember who you used to be." That's when it hit Edwin like lightning. True success wasn't measured in dollars or buildings or magazine covers. True success was measured in lives improved, communities strengthened, promises kept. Everything he'd achieved meant nothing if it came at the cost of destroying the people he should have protected. "Your mother was right about something else too," Edwin said, pulling his phone from his soaked jacket. "I am still in here somewhere. Buried, maybe, but not dead." His fingers moved across the screen, scrolling through contacts until he found his head of legal affairs. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Marcus, it's Edwin. I need you to draft immediate halt orders for every active demolition project. Yes, all of them. I don't care about the contracts. We'll pay the penalties." Trayvon stopped walking and stared at his father. "And Marcus, I want you to set up a meeting with the Westbrook families first thing Monday morning. The ones being displaced by our new development. We're going to make this right." Edwin hung up and looked at his son. "That's 847 families who get to keep their homes. It's not enough, but it's a start." For the first time since they'd met, Trayvon's expression softened slightly. They continued walking as the first hints of dawn began to creep over the horizon. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the air clean and sharp with the scent of wet earth and new possibilities. "I have conditions," Trayvon said quietly. "If you're serious about changing, name them." "Every community your company destroyed gets rebuilt, not with luxury condos, but with homes people can actually afford, with real community centers and parks and places where families can grow." Edwin nodded. "Done. And you establish a foundation in Mama's name, Veronica Martinez Foundation for Community Development. I help run it when I'm old enough." "Done. And you never, ever give another speech about corporate responsibility until you've actually earned the right to use those words." Edwin felt a smile tug at the corners of his mouth, the first genuine smile in decades. "Deal." As they reached the end of the block, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time, casting long golden rays across the broken landscape. But in that light, Edwin could see something he'd missed in the darkness. Green shoots pushing through concrete cracks, wildflowers blooming in abandoned lots, life finding a way to grow despite everything that had tried to destroy it. Just like his son, just like the chance for redemption he thought he'd lost forever, the walk back to the car was different, quieter, still heavy with 23 years of pain, but lighter too, like they were carrying the weight together now instead of apart. So what can we learn from Edwin and Trayvon's devastating encounter? First, success without soul is failure. Edwin built a billion-dollar empire, but lost his humanity in the process. Real success lifts others up, not tears them down. Second, the voices we silence will eventually speak. Every person Edwin ignored, every community he destroyed, every promise he broke, they all found their voice in his 7-year-old son standing in the rain. Third, it's never too late for redemption. Even after 23 years of betrayal and abandonment, Edwin chose to listen. He chose to change. He chose his son over his ego. Fourth, community over corporate greed. Always, the neighborhoods Edwin destroyed had something his penthouses never could: genuine human connection and love. Now here's my question for you. What voices have you been ignoring in your own life? Whose pain have you dismissed because it was inconvenient? If you believe in second chances and holding powerful people accountable, if you think abandoned children deserve justice, if you believe love should triumph over greed, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because staying silent when you witness injustice makes you complicit in the system. Welcome to the SoulThread family, where every story matters and every voice deserves to be heard. Next week, how a billionaire's wife discovered her husband's secret that destroyed 3 generations of families. Trust me, you won't see this twist coming.